So one of the other themes, if we can move on from that, and I'm sure that there will be questions from people when they look at this to ask more questions, which is the object of our conversation, is to enable people to listen to this, also thinking, reflecting back on their own lives, and then maybe questions will come out of that. But one of the other things that you spoke to earlier on was the story about the single parent. Um, that it's almost like it's an archetypal story. The story of the single parent that always is confronted when it comes to the birth and the choice of having children or not having children. It always confronts one with a very, very difficult choice. Almost like it's embedded in all the single parenthood. It's a tough point. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, when a girl falls pregnant, she sits with the problem. She's the first one who has to face a problem, especially if it is an unwanted child. Most situations happen in a time of just having a good time with somebody, and then in the war years those people had moved on, so those fathers weren't around, and the woman then was sitting with a child where the fathers could not be found. In today's case, it's more one night stands. We don't even know each other's name. And how do you then trace the father? But you still have the decision to make. And in some cases, it is a good relationship, but because of religious factors or other factors, children, especially when they're still studying, the unwanted child is inconvenient. So I would like to call it more the inconvenient child than the unwanted child.
Yeah.
So the mother then has to face facts and make a decision on this. I had a particular case that just comes to mind as I'm talking to you, where the religious clergy were asking her to have a termination. This lady came to me completely in depression. The mother brought her to me because this child was depressed. And during our questioning, it came out that she had a termination, strict religion. Uncle is a clergyman. She went to her own priest where she was living, and they all said, you know what, this doesn't go with our religion. You better, have this seen to. Nobody realizes what this does for the woman, because it is a case of done and dusted. And in this particular case, she was engaged to the father of this child, and he did not know, because she went to another country to have the termination, but she could not, her relationship was not the same. She could not be the same person, but they were going to get married in 6 months' time, and it was a big thing. And I had to work with her through the trauma of the termination, because we don't realize that this is actually a trauma to the body, let alone the mental, emotional situation. It is a trauma to the body. And people don't understand that. So when I worked with her through the trauma, one of the exercises I gave her is to inform the father of the child. And her fear was that he would then not go through with the marriage. And my question was, would you want to go into the marriage with a lie? This resulted in her speaking to all the clergy about what I had said. And the one clergyman that was actually the priest that was going to marry them said, this woman has more wisdom than I had. I was only looking at it from the point of our religious view. I never saw what it did to you mentally, emotionally, and what it would do for your future.
Right. And we can also perhaps add the word systemic, the systemic wisdom that you also brought to her understanding of the impact of the family, the marriage, and the rest. What comes to mind is that beautiful scene in Another Self when they stand at the olive tree and they're looking at the roots of the tree.
Yes.
So I think we can cut at the branches of the tree, but we must also understand what is the impact on the whole system. And in this particular case, the impact on the whole system when that woman has to terminate.
Exactly. And then also she did marry this man, and I got some message years later how happy she was, and the recognition that her next child was not her first child. And so we see that in the wisdom of the systemic work is when there's a gap, there's a gap, and that gap wants to be closed. So what happens to the children after that loss is always not understood. They are difficult children, or whatever may the case may be. We don't know. But when we look at it in constellation, it causes almost chaos in the sibling system. And when that child is recognized, or when those gaps are closed, we get the order back. And I think that is very important when we look at why we actually acknowledge and recognize a termination as a real gap that needs to be filled.